Hi, Founder fans, Jason here, and today's founder is King Henry of the United States. Except there was no King Henry of the United States. Before you go, I understand. I was clickbait. I'm sorry for tricking you, but there was a Prince Henry of Prussia. He looks like this. Prince Henry of Prussia was once contacted to see if he would consider coming to North America and becoming king of the United States. Yes. Now, before we talk about Prince Henry over here, we got to talk about his older brother. His older brother was King Frederick of Prussia, but you might know him better as Frederick the Great. Yes, Frederick the Great from your history books lived at the same time as the American founding. So actually did Catherine the Great in Russia, but that's a different story entirely. Now, King Henry, I'm sorry, King Frederick, I'll call him Frederick the Great, it's easier for me. Frederick the Great, unfortunately, in American history, he's kind of been soured on because when that guy Hitler became the ruler of Nazi Germany, he claimed Frederick the Great as his own. Now, a lot of the claims Hitler made were true when it comes to Frederick the Great being a one of the best military leaders, definitely of the 18th century, if not of all time. And additionally, he was a great uniter of Germans. He united Prussia. At the time, German was separate kingdoms, separate states, if you will. And Frederick the Great united many of them. But he shouldn't be associated with the Nazis because the way the American founders saw him, he was the model of what a constitutional monarch should look like. He made many liberal reforms, liberal in the sense that they used it back then, many liberal reforms to help the people actually participate in their government and improve the lives of the people of Prussia. Furthermore, the American founders specifically liked Frederick the Great because during the Revolution, the British famously hired German mercenaries to come help them suppress the rebellion in North America, as they saw it. We usually call these soldiers Hessians because a great deal of them were for Hesse Castle, which is one of the German states, but they actually came from several of the German states. We just all lumped them all together. They did not, however, come from Prussia. In fact, when certain German mercenaries wanted to travel through Prussia to get to Britain to sail and suppress the Americans, well, Frederick the Great said, no, stay out of here. And he was a great military leader and had the might and power to prevent them from treading on his territory. So you could see why the Americans had a certain respect for Frederick the Great, and that was naturally passed on to his younger brother, Prince Henry of Prussia. Okay, we need to take a time out now. The story I'm about to tell you took a long time to confirm. In fact, it was rumors for a long time that were used to talk trash about many Federalists, and they really came to prominence talking poorly about Rufus King, who was a great American founder and really the last Federalist holdout, the last Federalist to run for president against James Monroe after the party was all but dead anyway. But they used these rumors to slander him, and it became very popular at the time, but you couldn't prove it until 100 years later, at the end of the 1800s, one of Prince Henry of Prussia's letters that was never actually sent was found. This letter was addressed to Baron von Steuben, a great American soldier during the Revolution, a general during the Revolution, indicating the reasons he was going to turn down the offer to be king of the United States. So let's talk about the offer. Unfortunately, the actual letter that was originally sent to him has been lost to time. So we have to do a little bit of speculating, but here's what we do know. In 1786, things were not going great. The Continental Congress was a mess, couldn't get anything done, couldn't raise money, on the verge of bankruptcy, as was many of the several states on the verge of bankruptcy. Furthermore, Shays' Rebellion was breaking out in western Massachusetts. It looked like the Union might fall apart. It looked like the Revolution might have been for naught. Some people thought, well, the state governments have too much power, now they're dictators. And some people thought, well, the people are running rampant, we can't control them. What do we do? Keep in mind that at this point in time, monarchy was common. Yes, the Americans threw off their monarch, the King of Great Britain, but the idea of a monarch running a constitutional monarchy was not foreign to anyone. It's what everyone had. It was what the cool kids were doing at the time. Well, other than the cool kids in America who ended up starting a republic. But I'm jumping ahead. So in 1786, a gentleman from Massachusetts named Nathaniel Gorham is elected as president of the Continental Congress. The Continental Congress at this time, of course, had no power, and all the president did was sign documents on the convention's behalf. This is when Nathaniel Gorham, who I will pull up here, who's now president of the Continental Congress, sends a letter to Baron von Steuben, hoping he would send it to King Henry. This letter we do not have anymore. I will repeat, we do not have this letter. But according to the rumors that persisted forever, and the letter that Prince Henry wrote, turning Gorham down, essentially Nathaniel Gorham sent a letter that said, hey, do you want to come? Would you be interested in coming to North America and becoming king of our young nation? Don't get too mad at Nathaniel Gorham for this. I will get back to Nathaniel Gorham and why not. But essentially, according to the letter, well, Prince Henry wasn't interested. Prince Henry said, no, I don't think the people of the United States want a monarch, which he was right, it turns out, because immediately people were unhappy about this. And furthermore, Frederick the Great dies that August, which seems to have slowed him down. And also, Prince Henry, when you hear Prince, you think young man. Prince Henry was already 60 years old. So he was just not interested. Although he did say, he didn't name a particular person, but he did say, there's a few Frenchmen who might be interested if you want that. Now, it took too long for any response to happen. There's also rumors that by the time Prince Henry even got this letter, the opportunity had already been rescinded. Like he received another letter at the same time saying, thanks, no thanks. And that's why Henry never actually sent his denial or rejection letter back to the United States. But either way, it didn't happen. Now, Nathaniel Gorham, 1 year later, was elected to the Constitutional Convention. As I said, things were a mess and people knew there needed to be a change. Monarch might not have been the way, and they did try and keep it hush-hush. And it did only have Nathaniel Gorham's name, apparently on this letter we can't find, but as the president of the Continental Congress, any decision made by any members of the Congress would probably have just had Nathaniel Gorham's signature. So even if it was multiple people said, why don't we feel him out, it would have fallen on Nathaniel Gorham for him to send the letter. Either way, Nathaniel Gorham ends up being a great guy because the following year he's elected to the Constitutional Convention and he ends up being chairman of the Committee of the Whole. Now, I've mentioned it before. The Committee of the Whole is a parliamentary procedure that we still use today. Basically, what would happen is George Washington was president of the Constitutional Convention, but people wanted to be able to speak freely, and if you had a bad idea, you didn't want it on your permanent record. So what they would do is Washington would get up there, start the day, get off the stage, and Nathaniel Gorham would get up there and lead the Constitutional Convention while people had ideas and you fleshed things out. And then when they said, okay, we're ready to vote, Nathaniel Gorham would step down and Washington would step back up and they would make it official. Essentially, it's like any other committee, but instead of breaking off, it was a committee of the whole. It was a committee that had every single person in it. And I bring this up to kind of redeem Nathaniel Gorham's character in your mind. He was simply looking for solutions, and he became a major factor in the creation of the United States Constitution, one of the most underappreciated founders. In fact, I almost made him today's founder instead of Prince Henry, though, I mean, the title's so catchy. How could I not? Anyway, the Constitutional Convention meets, and almost right away, they are meeting in secret, but they publish a statement saying, no, we are not secretly trying to put together a monarch. The only thing they told America was we are not putting together a monarchy because rumors of this possible monarch came out immediately and persisted for decades and decades. And then, again, when it really comes to a head, when Rufus King is running for president in the almost in 1820, the year escapes me, 1820, I believe. So 30 years later, like 34 years later, and then again, it was 100 years after that before anyone actually found the letter addressed to Baron von Steuben from who else but King Henry of the United States. So I hope you enjoyed this video. It's a little longer than most of my videos, but it's an exciting thing to talk about, as you could tell. If you did like this, please hit like. If you're new here, definitely hit subscribe. I put out videos like this 5 days a week. Tomorrow, we're going to have a live video like we do every Wednesday, where I'll talk about the last 7 founders of the day on my website, founderoftheday.com. Thank you again. And if you're interested in supporting this site and some of offsetting some of the costs, because I've done a lot of upgrading, I'm still working on the camera and the color, and the sound is not perfect yet. I apologize. I'm trying. If you want to help me offset some of these costs, check out my Patreon page. I have a link down below. I put a lot of extra stuff over there. Some of the stuff I'm not necessarily comfortable talking about on here, and all the upgrades and everything I'm doing. So thank you so much for watching, and I will be back with a live video for you tomorrow.